Global National with Tara Nelson.
Hello and thank you for joining us. It is now the largest recall of its kind in history. Over the past 24 hours, word has gone out that hundreds of meat products must be pulled off store shelves. 4 people have already died, and health officials definitively linked it to a maple leaf plant in Ontario that ships to grocery stores and restaurants across the country. Now, consumer concern is expanding right along with the recall. Jackson Prosco is tracking developments from Toronto tonight, and he joins us now. Jackson. An extremely worried Montreal family is in Fort Lauderdale, Florida tonight, looking for answers in the very suspicious disappearance of Josephine Frena. Her husband allegedly has a history of violence, breaking into Frena's home with an axe, leading her to seek a restraining order. But as Mike Armstrong tells us, so far, police are not naming any suspects. Stateside now, a week of speeches and rallies to coronate Barack Obama's presidential bid is getting underway in Denver. The Democratic convention culminates with a speech by Obama on Thursday. But just a day after he announced his running mate, the party is hoping their big party will get a big boost in the polls from all the buzz. Eric Sorensen is leading our Denver coverage this coming week, and he joins us now from the convention center. Eric. After 17 colorful days packed with excitement, triumph, disappointment, and plenty of controversy, the Beijing Olympics ended today with a dramatic closing ceremony. It was China's moment to cement its status as a rising superpower, and it didn't disappoint. Our Mike Edgell has been in the Chinese capital the entire time, and he joins us now. Mike. For all of the billions China spent on the Beijing Olympics this summer, it set a significant part of the budget aside for tourist facilities. And by facilities, we actually mean the washrooms. Beijing dispatched 8,000 toilet minders, each responsible for a specific public restroom in the city. Restrooms that stand up to various degrees of international scrutiny. Elaine Yong explains. An Ontario man who for 20 years carried the label of rapist is speaking out tonight, trying to clear his name. Anthony Hannemeyer wants his conviction for brutally assaulting a 15-year-old girl overturned because one of Canada's most notorious killers, Paul Bernardo, has admitted responsibility for the crime. Speaking from his home in London, Ontario today, Hannemeyer says he only pled guilty at the time because he was afraid of spending a long time in jail. Hannemeyer served 2 years in jail, but will formally withdraw his guilty plea in court next week based on new information about Bernardo's jailhouse confession to police. Today, Global News is exploring green issues that impact you, and this is a big one. A war is brewing on Canada's border right now, one that has the potential to be bigger than any fight for oil. U.S. presidential hopeful John McCain weighed in today over American access to water in the Great Lakes we share. Many U.S. states are eyeing the massive supply. But as Mike Drolet tells us, the economic and ecological consequences could be irreversible. Ask any parent and they'll tell you kids these days seem to grow up too fast. So imagine the shock among the parents of 17 schoolgirls in one small town in the U.S. upon learning their daughters, their babies, are about to have babies of their own. Even more shocking, the teens may have gotten pregnant as part of a bizarre pact. And as our Eric Sorensen explains, what's happening at this one high school in Gloucester, Massachusetts, may be a symptom of a larger problem.
Canada's most watched national newscast, Global National, with Kevin Newman. Substituting tonight, Tara Nelson.
Hello and thank you for joining us. West Coasters tend to look on soggy weather with a dry sense of humor, but there is little funny about the record-smashing rainfall that has saturated BC. Over the past 48 hours, virtually every river in the south has either flooded its banks or is dangerously close to it. The rain so heavy, one government official tapping into whatever humor remains, saying he didn't know how people could breathe because it's like being underwater. Some of the worst flooding around Chilliwack. Late today, many of the hundreds who fled getting the all clear to return, very anxious about what they will find. They came to Canada half a century ago, following their hearts, leaving war-torn Europe behind to start a new life in a far-off land. An update now on a story we first told you about last night. More than 300 Canadian war brides arriving by train in Halifax a short time ago, the last leg of a pilgrimage back to the city where most of them got their first glimpse of the country that would become their home. Our Remembrance Day broadcast from Vancouver, Ottawa, and Afghanistan is this Saturday morning at 11:30 Atlantic Time, 10:30 for most of the rest of the country, and 7:30 for viewers in BC. We hope you'll join us for that. And that is Global National for Tuesday. We are streaming this broadcast now on globalnational.com. I'm Tara Nelson. Local news is next on most global stations.
Global National with Tara Nelson.
Hello and thank you for joining us. The decree was made in 1919 that Armistice Day would be set aside to honor the sacrifices of those who served in the First World War. But almost a century later, many more wars have been fought, countless lives lost, and the occasion we've come to know as Remembrance Day has many different meanings for all Canadians. Tonight, our extensive coverage includes Francis Salvaggio in Kandahar as our troops pause for poignant reflection. Daryl Kaninen-Belt in Toronto with two of Canada's last surviving World War I veterans. Hannah Boudreau in our nation's capital as different generations work together preserving the legacy of remembrance. But first to our Ottawa Bureau Chief Jacques Bourbeau with a look at today's emotional memorial at the National Cenotaph. On a day set aside for remembrance of the terrible costs of war, the United States government is taking a sobering look at what is, and more specifically, what isn't working in Iraq. This week's midterm election sending a strong message that not all voters are on board with the current plan. The question now is, will the president make the changes many experts are calling for? Paul Johnson explains. While Africans fear global warming will reduce the amount of rain falling on the drought-plagued continent, many on Canada's west coast have the opposite concern. For the second time in less than a year, a severe storm has residents scrambling to sandbag their homes. As Global National's Jazz Johal tells us, many believe climate change is to blame. For some people, running one marathon is the ultimate challenge. But for a Victoria man, testing his strength took him far beyond the usual 42-kilometer race. Jeffrey Chand is one of 3 Canadians to finish a grueling competition, one that saw him pounding the sand of the Sahara Desert for 7 days straight. Sophie Louis reports from Egypt. Finally tonight, 2 friends, proving despite the years between them, there doesn't have to be a generation gap. These 2 men are united over a common goal, to keep the stories of Canadian soldiers alive. They met while trying to teach today's youth about D-Day. And as Hannah Boudreau tells us, both are determined the history will not be lost. That was Hannah Boudreau in Ottawa. I'm Tara Nelson. Thank you for sharing your time with us tonight.